In what can only be described as a geopolitical shakedown, the White House is making it clear that U.S. support for Ukraine isn't about defending democracy, but rather about extracting economic concessions. The demand that Ukraine hand over critical minerals as payment for past and future military aid is a textbook case of imperialist extortion, dressed up in the language of security guarantees and sustainability. Let's not pretend this is about national security, long-term strategy, or even realpolitik. This is about the U.S. president's transactional worldview, where every foreign policy move must yield a tangible economic or political profit, preferably one that benefits him and his inner circle. The message from his White House is clear. We bailed you out, now give us the goods. It's an audacious attempt to reduce Ukraine's existential fight to a crude business transaction, with the U.S. playing the role of mafia enforcer. The White House National Security Advisor practically confirmed that Trump's team views aid as a loan rather than an alliance, implying that Ukraine should hand over access to lithium, titanium, and other strategic resources in return for continued U.S. military support. This is a seismic shift from previous U.S. policy, which at least pretended to frame aid as a commitment to democratic resilience. The Ukrainian president's refusal to sell our state is a defiant stand in the face of this thinly veiled blackmail. For years, Ukraine has been bleeding, fighting against an aggressive Russian invasion, while simultaneously keeping the West's supply chains for vital minerals secure. This unilateral action exposes a stunning lack of concern for Ukraine's sovereignty, the very thing the war is being fought over. If Ukraine caves to U.S. demands for control over its critical minerals, what differentiates this from Russia's own resource-driven ambitions? A White House advisor called the proposed mineral exchange an incredible historic opportunity, which sounds eerily similar to how a loan shark pitches a predatory contract. The idea that Ukraine should pay for past aid that was provided under the banner of protecting democracy, is an insult not just to Kyiv, but to every U.S. ally. This sets a dangerous precedent. Will Taiwan be forced to hand over semiconductor manufacturing rights if China invades? Will Israel be asked to mortgage its defense technology in exchange for continued U.S. military support? The U.S. administration's view of foreign policy doctrine is clear. If America intervenes, there must be an economic kickback. It is the return of the America First doctrine in its most primitive and mercenary form. Beyond the minerals grab, recent rhetoric about Ukraine is deeply troubling. By claiming that Ukraine started the war, an outright Kremlin talking point, the U.S. is actively undermining Ukraine's moral and diplomatic standing. The president's description of the Ukrainian leader as a dictator is laughable, considering his own well-documented admiration for actual dictators like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Mohammed bin Salman. The U.S. decision to exclude Ukraine from key negotiations further signals a stark reversal of U.S. policy. Whereas previous administrations sought to bolster Ukraine's diplomatic standing, Trump seems intent on cutting the Ukraine out of its own future. The fact that Zelensky was left out of U.S.-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia is nothing short of humiliating. It's clear that the U.S. would rather strike a grand bargain with Russia, likely at Ukraine's expense, than continue supporting Zelensky's fight for independence. This minerals deal is not just a bad idea, it's a betrayal of the principles that U.S. foreign policy claims to uphold. Ukraine is not a gas station or a mine to be looted in exchange for military aid. If the U.S. continues down this path, it risks of turning U.S. support into something as toxic as Russian aggression, a coercive tool used to strip Ukraine of its sovereignty. One thing is clear, the Ukraine is fighting a war on two fronts, one against Russia and one against a U.S. administration that sees Ukraine as a commodity rather than country charity. Joseph Schaffhausen, my independent commentary for Skillings Mining Review.